Good morning, Maria.
Good morning, Ray.
Please tell us your name and your title.
I am Maria Chavez Quispe from Bolivia, from the Aymara peoples. I am a theologian, indigenous Christian theologian. I am currently serving in the WCC as indigenous peoples consultant.
Tell us what WCC is.
WCC is the largest community fellowship of churches in the world. So we are representing almost more than 500 churches.
Yes, the World Council of Churches is large indeed. And we are very happy to have you this morning with us.
Thank you.
And please tell us, as an indigenous woman, what are some of the challenges and barriers which you encounter in your everyday life?
As you know, Glory, indigenous peoples are among the most impoverished peoples in the world. So the situation of indigenous women is quite worse than in comparison to the indigenous peoples in general. So we suffer the lack of resources, financial resources, lack of sovereignty in the food, and also the violations, continuous violations of our human rights, the non-recognition of our self-determination as peoples, the lack of access to educational and health systems, and rapes by military forces. So I think we are suffering much, so much in this world. So there are so many challenges that we have to face in everyday life. And yeah, our life is not secure in this system in which we are living.
What are some of the root causes of these very sad realities that you have presented?
Well, we must talk indeed about the colonization period, because our peoples used to live in a very different way than today's way. So in the case of Abya Yala, the so-called Latin America and the Caribbean, and the case also of North America, the history of the invasion has started 520 years ago. So since then we have suffered so many violations of our resources. And I must say that the colonization process is still in course now. And that process of colonization was supported by the Christianization and legitimized by the Christian faith. So what has happened in our continent was indeed an hecatomb, I consider the largest genocide in the history of the world. 90% of the indigenous population in our continent was killed. And we indeed are the survival peoples of that process. So while the colonization period finished, the republics started their history. And actually for our peoples, the period of the republics is quite worse than the colonial period. No? And even if the political organizations have changed in our continent, the colonial system which shapes the mind of the people has been there since then.
So in order for the indigenous people to have real liberation, the mindset also needs to change.
Yeah, that's true.
What is the role of the church in that? You are from Bolivia, and tell us about the women leaders who shape this new mindset among the indigenous people.
In Bolivia, I think in the whole Latin America, the case of Bolivia is very particular, because in Bolivia we have the first indigenous president, Evo Morales. So since he is ruling the country, he has started a process of decolonization of our minds. And it has so many implications in the daily life of people, because starting with the experience of my people, for instance, we reinforce the use of our language in the daily life. We try to keep the language even in the educational system, meaning that we can relearn and to teach to our children our language. And you know, the language is the basis of our culture. We transmit all our worldview through language. We can stand up as peoples if we keep our language and our cultural values. So that's such an important contribution from the side of the government. So churches are trying to do so as well through the Sunday schools, through all the possibilities of workshops and training of leadership that we have. But it's not enough, because what we are struggling against is not just, I mean, you can understand in theories the colonial system, but to apply that to the daily life of people, it's quite different, and it makes troubles in the daily life. So that's one thing. We even have a ministry for decolonization in Bolivia, which is new and the only one around the world. And besides the decolonization, in women in leadership, and indigenous women especially, we need to face the question of the patriarchalism. Because we do know that in our cultures, for instance in the Aymara culture, which I come from, we used to have a kind of dual power for men and women. So both kind of powers were complementary. Since the colonization came and the Christianization came, all this order was just blocked. And nowadays we are trying to recover that kind of understanding so we can rule once again men for men and women for women. And we can complement that in the political structure. So that's quite difficult. And we have in Bolivia a ministry for despatriarcalization, is the name, which is again the only one around the world. Because we think decolonize our minds goes alongside despatriarchalizing our culture, our institutions. And that's most difficult in the churches, because Christianization, in my understanding, is one of the most patriarchal religions, and the basis for that is a kind of abstract theology which legitimizes the power of men. So the struggle for indigenous women in the churches is more challenging than in the wider society.
Yes, you talked about patriarchy, and you talked about Christianization and colonization, which went hand in hand, and the role of the Bolivian women leaders in recovering the language and in the decolonizing process. And it is a sad wrinkle in the history of Christianity that often the real gospel did not come through very well. And of course, as a theologian, you know that the gospel has a liberating power, even though the Christian practices of the colonizers may not have been helpful in bringing forth the real gospel to the people. So, how do the indigenous Christians strive to be faithful to the gospel while retaining their identity as indigenous people? I know it is a huge struggle, because as a global movement, the indigenous people still have the self-understanding that Christianity was imposed on them from outside. I think what I'm trying to say is there a way the gospel could be distinguished from the negative practices of the imposition of Christianity? And how can that be done now? It is a gospel and culture question. As a theologian, how would you approach that?
It's a very hard question that you are saying. We can develop a thesis on that question, and actually we are doing so in the Teología India, in the processes of the Teología India, which goes back to 40 years now, and in the process of Teología Andina in Bolivia. So, but I would like to start my answer by recalling a myth of the Huasteca peoples in Mexico, in Hidalgo, Mexico.
Please do so.
I will try to say that, and I hope this myth will be understood, but I don't think so, because it comes from the Huasteca language to Spanish and then to English. So I know I will not be faithful to that myth, but even though I want to try to explain that. It says that there was the sun, who used to be fed by the blood of the peoples, and it means that the sun needed sacrifices. And he looked at a dog, the name was Xolotl, who used to be very close to the peoples and made children and peoples happy. And the sun was wondering, wanted to have the blood of Xolotl, because he said Xolotl is very happy, so that will strengthen me even more. So I want the sacrifice of Xolotl. So the priest of the sun went to take Xolotl, but this dog was very wise, and he used to run far away from the priest and become mice. When mice was in the place, become fish in the river, so to hide from the priests. So it took long. Xolotl was escaping. At the end, the priests were so tired, and the sun also was so tired. And he said finally, "Leave Xolotl. I don't want any more his blood. If he's happy and makes people happy, that's good, that's fine with me. I will not eat anymore the blood of the peoples or the nature. My heart will not burn anymore. It will be a heat, a caress for people. I will never damage the plants, the peoples, or the animals." If we interpret that myth, the dog, the god of the Huastecas, Xolotl, indeed achieved to change the mind of the sun. The sun was the god of the Azteca peoples. The Huastecas were dominated by the Aztecas, and the sun promised to not burn again people, plants, neither animals. So that means that the gods can be changed, can change the face, and can be with the people, because they can accept the happiness of the peoples and the gods of the peoples. So our cultures in Latin America, in Abya Yala, are very inclusive. So when the Christian God came, they were able to include the Christian God in our religious system. They were able to sit with the Christian God in the same tapestry of our cultures. The contrary, the opposite was never true. For the Christian church, we were idolaters. We were condemned to death just because we didn't share the same concept of God. Our pains have started in that narrow understanding of the Christian theologians. In Teología India, we say that our theology is a millennial, a theology of millennia of years, since the beginning of our peoples. Christian theology, indigenous Christian theology, has not started with the arrival of the Christians. We already had theologians. We were able to indigenize the Christian faith. And we have discovered that that face of God that Christians brought to us, racist one, violent one, that God was not the truth God. So from our myths and our symbology and our religion, we were able to discover the strength of the gospel, which,